Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I'm glad you're here. So this episode is releasing August 7th, which is my mom's birthday. So happy birthday, Mom. But also, it's the 13th anniversary of the day that my son was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So as I was preparing for this episode, it occurred to me, wow. And I was just kind of reflecting on the 13 years. And, that morning we started out completely ignorant of, what we now call the medical mom life or a special needs mom or cancer mom and all the different identities that we have taken along the way. And so we ended up in the hospital that day, waiting for our first major brain surgery and big surgery, and now think about the person that went into the hospital, myself, and how I almost can't even remember the before experience because the after is so profoundly different and the jarring of the moment was so significant. So it's interesting to reflect back on for sure. I know many of you have these kinds of anniversaries that just kind of pop into your mind and you realize, oh my gosh, this is the day this many years ago that I learned this, whether it's about part of your pregnancy or the labor and birth of your child, all the different aspects of what we experience as their moms. There's a lot of significance to these anniversaries. So I was going to say happy anniversary. That doesn't feel quite right. All right. So this episode is actually a return episode for me. As many of you know that are regular listeners, I took a couple weeks off in June and all of July in terms of producing new episodes and content, really simply because I needed a little break. It was a difficult medical year for us for sure. And I was really feeling it. Also comes at the end of the school year where the difficult medical year bled into a difficult school year. And so I took a break. And we also went on a family vacation and there's a lot of wins. It was a really great vacation and very glad we had the opportunity to go. And just like life, the challenges of disability definitely were present as we travel. As you all know, those don't go away. So I do feel thankful actually of how good it was considering how challenging it can be to travel. So good news is I'm back, I'm fresh, and I'm ready. And I've been spending a ton of time and energy and thought thinking about how I want to solve for some of the problems that I see in terms of the way I serve, or gaps, I should say. They're not problems, but almost every morning, I'm going out for a walk with my dog, Sally, and we actually have a lot of hills where I live. So kind of walk up the hills, sometimes get a really great view, sometimes get a really cloudy view, but I can get up to see the ocean quite far, but I can still see it. And yeah, like I said, I'm just thinking about you, listening to podcasts, learning more about how to serve you all, and thinking about the best way to do that. And ultimately solving for some of the challenges. Specifically, there's 2 challenges that I hit up against. One is how to create more meaningful community. So, I call this podcast in some cases a community, but really it's a one-way conversation because as much as I ask y'all to respond, not many of you do. And thank you to the people that do take a minute just to reach out and have that interaction. I love it. So please don't be shy. So that meaningful community, and this is the other part that I've been really grappling with for actually probably as long as even before I've been offering anything to this audience, is how to make it accessible. How to make the work I do accessible to people who want it. Obviously, the podcast is free, so yay, that is one way of making it accessible. But what I know is possible when people really engage is, the people in my program know this as well, that like it's life-changing, it's profoundly impacting, it is completely transformational. And so I want people who want that to have it. Yet also, I have to acknowledge I'm running a business for the purpose of providing for my family. So I don't choose to give everything away for free. Yet, there's very real challenges as it comes to being a parent, a family who is, living in these days, but also balancing the cost of being a parent to a child who needs a lot and deserves a lot. So those are the things I'm thinking about in this head of mine. And so I've just been really looking at what's next to iterate the program that I offer, Pathway to Peace. And I'm really excited about what's coming. And I would tell you more right now, but honestly, I am still in the process of actually interviewing all the different people that have experienced it to really hone in on the aspects that make it the magic that it is. So I can do more of that. And also, actually, many of you will remember that at the end of the podcast, there used to be a note saying, hey, come join the free Facebook community and have more conversations there. And I made the decision to close that group for the reason is that it ultimately wasn't effective to create the community that I wanted to create. The interactions, the way that, essentially we can hold each other as women doing this together. And one of the problems was that I didn't have the bandwidth to put that much energy into it. So I had to kind of get honest with myself about that. But secondly, and I'm sure this is no surprise to anybody, is Facebook decides what they're going to do. And I don't really have any control over it. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is working for me because all my people are like out there and they said they want to be part of this group. Yet Facebook says, nah, I'm not going to show them. So I decided, you know what? Let's just acknowledge this is not working and we're going to try something new. So you can expect that what's coming is more opportunities for true relationship and connection. It's going to be the theme, we'll say. The theme of, I don't do seasons, but we'll say the theme of the season. Okay, so the other thing I want to really emphasize is that because I don't know exactly what's coming, and I'm not telling you about it right in this moment, although after I record this, I may be able to update some of that, is that I want you to stay in the know. I want you to know what's happening, to know the opportunities, both free and paid, that will be coming up for you. And the best way to do that is to sign up for the email list that I have. I send out a weekly email about each podcast episode. And so you'll get that and it can remind you, to listen and or perk your ears and interest on a topic that you may be interested in. But also, more importantly, it's going to be the way that I share the opportunities that are coming up. So get on the list. You'll find the show notes to this episode and it'll be pretty obvious. It'll say something like join the list or something like that. And I promise not to overdo it and to spam you with stuff that you don't really want. That's that. Now, I think that covers everything I wanted to share in the beginning here. And so now let's move into the meat of the episode. And, as I mentioned, I haven't recorded an episode in a bit, and I do have all the next 3 months brainstormed and kind of an outline for the episodes I want to bring. And this is the one I wanted to bring first because it's kind of a light entry into recording again. To me, it's a fun topic. And I think it'll be a particularly useful timing in terms of applying the information in this episode to the season of life as we go back to school. And many of us go back to school. I know some of y'all were in summer school, but as we gear up for the fall and for the new year, the new year of us mothers. Okay. So this is a tool that I use all the time. Literally, the more I use it, the more I think of ways to use it. And so I wanted to be a good friend and make sure that I share all the good things with you. So that's the heart of this episode. And so what is this tool? I'm talking about. Do you see how I did a little mystery there? Like I didn't tell you what it was right away. Well, time for the drum roll. The tool I'm talking about is ChatGPT, otherwise known as AI. So I'm guessing like this is not a new word or concept to you. I'm guessing you've heard about it. Some of you may be very well acquainted with it, but I'm going to talk to the people who like have never thought about it further than hearing about it. You might have heard about it and be like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I'm a mom. I'm a caregiver. What am I going to use that for? And so I'm really speaking to you in particular. And so I'm going to go over the very basics because I was talking to a friend. Who was it? It was somebody this week. And it was essentially, we were having this conversation. They're like, what do you even like do? Like how do you even find this thing? And so let's start there. So what I'm talking about, the tool I use, and there are many others. So I do not claim to be an expert in this. I am sharing more of my personal experience and what's worked for me. So ChatGPT is literally, oh gosh, and I always say it wrong. Okay, let's try that again. We're going to go ChatGPT. So if you hear me say it incorrectly, ignore me. And it's ChatGPT. It's really funny because actually Alex, my friend and editor, I was telling her about the episode. She's like, okay, but you have to say it right because you know you always say it wrong, right? I was like, wait, what? And even when I'm trying, I don't say it right. So I'm looking at it right now and reading it, ChatGPT. So that's a website. You'll go to it. It's free. And so if you get to where you're like needing to pay for something, turn around. You've gone too far. And it's very similar to a search engine. So you're going to open this, or you're going to see a little bar. It's going to look pretty. It's very simple. You're going to feel like, okay, like this is manageable. I can work with this. So it is somewhat like a search engine. So you'll see that bar. I want you to consider it a little bit different though. Rather than a search engine where you're just mining information, it's more like a magic genie where you get to tell it what you want or make a wish. The outputs are much more customizable. And so you can use it to be much more useful to you. So it's not just information anymore. And so that's where I want you to really recognize like it's kind of taking information to the next level. What's funny about a search engine is, we all type a lot of things into search engines. And yeah, I think that the difference when I notice how I type things into chat is that I'm going to be more demanding, like tell me, make me, or write me, and I'll give more information about how I use that specifically. But I always feel like a little bit bossy. And so actually I end up saying, please write me. And chat goes back and says, you're welcome. Or when I say thank you, it says you're welcome. So we have a good relationship is what I'm saying, even though I can be a little demanding. And so overall, as an example, I think using the tool, one of the differences is like when you go to type a phrase, like I said, into Google or a search engine, you're going to write a phrase like IEP meeting prep if you're real short on words. If you go a little farther, you might write, how do I prepare for my first IEP meeting? So that would be something I think very commonly typed into Google. And you could type the same thing into chat as well, like how do I prepare for my first IEP meeting? But I think what's the opportunity is to take it a step further and where you might say, make me a checklist for my upcoming IEP meeting. And then I'll go in later to make some suggestions and you might even be more specific. You might be saying, make me a checklist for my upcoming IEP meeting for my child who has low vision and dyslexia. But getting more specific allows chat to serve you better. So I think actually now that I'm saying that, I'm like, this is actually a great rule for life. The more we ask for, the more we get. The more specific and powerful we make our requests, the more they are fulfilled. So that's an unexpected takeaway from this episode. Other ways to think of chat is like a brainstorm buddy. So when you find yourself thinking, what are the other ways to do that? Or what am I missing here? Chat's a great way, a great friend to turn to help you come up with ideas. So for me, oftentimes I use it as a jump start, and I'm going to give some examples later on exactly what I mean by that, but just allows your brain to be jump started in areas that is in there. It's in there. The information's out there. You just don't have it immediately accessible. Maybe because you didn't sleep at all last night. That could be part of it, right? So Another way I like to think of chat is filling in for experience that you don't have yet. So it's like, what's the saying? You don't know what you don't know, right? So that's not going to be super helpful here because you wouldn't know the question to ask. But I think sometimes you know what you don't know. And so perhaps you're getting a new diagnosis and you don't know anything about it. You don't even know how to say the word. And so that's where this can be a very effective tool to help expedite the gaining of some of that experience, or even knowing where to go to get that experience. You can consider it's like a cheat code for a video game. You get to do something faster and potentially better. When I'm using chat, I find it gets me like 90% of the way there in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish oftentimes. And then I add my human element to make it work to get it to that 100%. And probably, if we're honest, like 110%, because writing, I would not say, is one of my most gifted areas. And I think chat's a pretty good writer. So together, we're quite a dynamic duo. And then, also like sometimes chat, like she's very creative. She comes up with really good ideas that I wouldn't have thought of. So those are just some high level ways of how I think about using it. And that is not an exhaustive list. Okay, let's turn to some use cases. I'm going to share specific things that I actually have. This is how I have used chat. I literally went through some of my history. I pulled out examples that I thought were applicable, and these are what I chose to bring to you. And I have a long list, so there was a lot to choose from. And what I want to emphasize here is I'm going to be giving examples both from caregiving and mothering. I'm not really giving business examples because I do use it for business a lot, but all of you are mothers, period. And all of you, I'm going to assume, are caregivers. And so for some of us, we have children that were, kind of a typical mom role. We're doing the typical mom things. And then of course, we're adding caregiving in the roles in addition to that. So I think it's just useful to kind of recognize the wholeness of life, and it's not kind of one or the other. So the first situation that I'll share about is the way that I used it to prepare for the application for a program here in California called IHSS. So this particular program provides income to caregiving family members or people that are in the home with somebody who needs care. And there's a lot of little details. I know y'all know. You have all the different states have all the different things, and y'all know how complex they are and how no one really explains it very well. And trying to get the information on how to prepare for these meetings can sometimes be like half the challenge. So I wanted to be very prepared for this meeting. I was actually quite nervous about this meeting. And, anytime we haven't done something before, naturally, it feels maybe a little intimidating. So I was told that I needed to prepare a hazard and injury log. Now, the information provided on the state website wasn't very thorough. That's essentially what I got. It was, I need a hazard and injury log. And so I thought, okay, well, that sounds vague. And so what I asked Chat to help me with is I wrote, what do I need to include on a hazard and injury log for IHSS in California? And so Chat spit out essentially a grid of kind of columned information of like what you should include in this document. So that was a great starting point. I thought, awesome. And so I was like, okay, well, and how do I get that onto a spreadsheet? And so I said, hey, great. Can you make me an Excel template? So then from that Excel template, I was literally able to open it and have the template, the framework done. Now, clearly I had to put in the information for the different incidences that happened, but you can see how that kind of took away the questioning, the like, oh, what do I put on it? And kind of like where I could get stuck on getting that thing done. Now, did I still make customizations? Did I think, oh, that's a little bit extra? Yes, I did. Did I still get denied for the service I was trying to go for? Yes, I did. However, at the time I was doing it, it was what I needed, and it is going to be a useful tool as we work to appeal and essentially get Levi what he deserves. So that is example, we'll say number one. Okay, next example. At the end of the school year, I got an email from the team that supports Levi, actually the whole ninth grade class. So he's in ninth grade or was in ninth grade. And they were just letting us know, hey, end of the school kind of celebration. This is what we're going to do. We're going to walk to this neighboring park and we're going to play all these games and it's going to be so much fun. And they kind of outline the games. Now, mind you, Levi is a child who has significant mobility problems, coordination problems, vision challenges with the heat. So basically all of this to me was like, this feels like it's not a good fit. This doesn't feel like the email that I received really didn't indicate to me that his needs were being accommodated. And so I was bothered. So I decided to write an email responding, saying just kind of, I don't remember exactly what I said, but essentially saying, sounds really fun. And my concern is that these events don't sound very accessible to Levi. And I asked them to consider. So actually the question I asked Chat, because what I wanted to write in the email, I didn't want to just be like, basically shut down what they were proposing. I wanted to be part of the solution and kind of part of the team and suggesting what could work. And that it wasn't asking them to, completely reinvent the wheel. I was ultimately asking them to be a little bit more thoughtful about what they were planning to do that day. And so what I asked Chat was, what are the games that a high school class can play that a person with a wheelchair can easily participate in? So I think I was more focused on his ability to not stand up and run like all the other children. And so Chat wrote back a nice handful of really fun ideas that were super simple and familiar to people, right? This wasn't like go out and buy a bunch of new supplies and like train people for 5 years to figure this out. It was very simple and approachable. And so it gave me a list to then respond back and saying, hey, some of the ideas that I brainstormed are blank, 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 and blank. And so I wrote this email and eventually I got an email back saying it was a well-received email. And they said, yeah, oh, definitely. We have all these other things planned. And so, we're all good. So yay. End of the story here is when I asked Levi, hey, did you have fun? The answer was yes. So mission accomplished. Next situation, next case study here. So this one I think is a little bit funny because it shows, I don't know, it's being a little sassy when I did it. The backstory is that the vision provider, the ophthalmologist at our insurance provided facility isn't great. We don't love him. He loves himself. He thinks he's pretty great. But anyhow, because vision is such an important component of Levi's life, because at the time he had just had more proton radiation in his head around his optical nerves, it was pretty important to me to approach it with a high level of care. So I found a different provider, a neuro-ophthalmologist through UCSD, and made the decision that we were going to pay cash for this. I had done this for many years in the past previously. So I was like, okay, it's around $400 or $500 and worth it, in my opinion, to get the care that he needs. And so we went on with the appointment. They asked me to pay up front. I was a little annoyed by that, but I paid. And actually it was even a little less than I thought it was. So I thought, well, sounds great. And so we went on to the appointment. And in this case, actually, this is the part where I'm like, okay. So the ophthalmologist actually showed up via laptop, like Zoom, that the resident was walking around carrying. So I was like, I feel like that's something that you should disclose before somebody comes to an appointment, that like the doctor's going to be there virtually. I did really like him, by the way, though. He seemed pretty good. Anyhow, so they did their things. For any of you that have gone to the ophthalmologist, like a million different people do a million different things, especially if you're at a teaching hospital. And so I didn't ask too many questions. I was somewhat familiar with the things and we kind of went along for the ride. And we went on with our merry way and case closed. We had our appointment. We were done. And it was all fun and games until I got several bills in the mail for the different tests and procedures that they did during the appointment. And I was like, wait a second, slow your roll, guys, because guess what? Like, you did not tell me that there was fees associated to this. Like, this doesn't work this way. Like, you don't go to a restaurant and then they just bring you 25 beers and be like, yeah, now you owe us the money for it. There has to be this interchange, in my opinion. Like, it just feels like a real great way to take advantage of consumers if, like, basically you just give them services and bill them later because they already bought it. Or, like, it just doesn't work for me. So I was, going through the normal avenues of talking to the financial services, etc., and really wasn't getting a high level of care from the organization that I was working with. And I got fed up. I was like, this isn't cool. Like, I'm not cool. So I looked up the CEO of the organization. Her name's Patty. And I decided to write her a letter. Well, Chat and I, let's be clear. Chat and I wrote her a letter. And so I put the criteria, and I put in Chat, I said, write a letter to the CEO, put the name of the health organization with the following. And I put all the details of the charges and the interchanges. And at the end, I said, and a request for the charges to be redacted. So Chat spit out a very well written and respectful tone email that I was like, yes, this communicates exactly what I wanted to communicate. And so I put the stamp on and mailed the envelope. And I am glad to say that I have not since received any more invoices or bills for that they seem to have heard my request. And I did not hear from Patty directly. She did not, reach out. I didn't expect her to, but I did enjoy thinking about the office, whoever received it, like getting it and thinking, wow, this lady took the time to write this letter. Okay. I don't know. For whatever reason, it kind of entertained me. So that was one. Last specific use case here that I'm going to share, and this one is more of a mom related role versus something specifically for somebody with disabilities, but I think it can be applied many different places. I don't know. This one just tickles my fancy because I was like, this is like a thing that I wouldn't have been able to do nearly as well on my own, but it's actually really important. So scenario is that my now almost 17-year-old son was turning 16, therefore getting his license, and we were going to be providing him a car to use, to drive. And it just didn't feel right being like, well, here's the keys. Like I feel like there's so many components to this agreement and like that we needed to be able to dialogue through and agree upon, like who's paying for what happens if, and etc. And so I asked Chat to write me a driving and car contract for my teenage son so he has responsibilities in taking care of his car maintenance and cleanliness. He's actually really impressed me with the whole cleanliness thing. Like he takes a lot of pride in his 2001 Tahoe. And yeah, that's right. You heard it, folks. Not 2021, 2001 Tahoe. So it's a well-loved car, but it looks very nice once he details it. Okay, distracted there by my pride of my son. But so it spit out this contract that was all contracty languages, which I actually appreciated for this just because I feel like it made it more official. And we took the time to go over it with him. I customized it in certain areas, added some things that were really important to me, and we all signed on the dotted line. So we have an agreement to go back onto, like should anything kind of be, not as it should in terms of how things go. It was just an opportunity also to talk through like, okay, who's paying for what? When the car does this, what are we covering? What are you covering? And really teaching him the skill of like the responsibility of car ownership without car ownership. Okay. Now, if you want me to send you the contract, I would be glad to. I've actually sent it to a couple people because oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. And so, I obviously can't take credit for the language because Chat wrote it, but I will take credit for the idea. Okay. Just did a little quick brainstorm of ways that, and I hope that your mind's like, oh my gosh, I could use it for this. I could use it for that. So here's some ideas that I have for you. So one, writing an appeal letter or writing an appeal of any type. So emails, explaining perhaps to an IEP team a request or what wasn't working or any variety of things. But there's a lot of communication that's required as a special needs mom. I always teach my people inside my group that you are the CEO of this company and you showing up as a leader and an effective communicator at that is super important. So this could just be a very effective tool in communication and in dialogue, actually. This one I actually thought of that I was like, oh, I'm going to use this definitely to help. At the beginning of the school year, we ask for a meeting for all of the people that will have Levi under their care. So Levi's in a typical class. He's not in a special day class. And so, or I should say general education class. And so there's a lot of different people in high school that, he's supervised by, and he has a lot of very particular medical conditions that are very important that people understand so that they can properly care for him. Yet, I know you guys will all get me on this. They're really complex. They're hard to understand. Most of my family, extended family, doesn't even understand them. So we have this meeting at the beginning of the year to try to explain everything. And, we've been doing this, like I said, for 13 years now, and I still have a hard time. And so as an example for what this can look like, so what I wrote into chat for this example is I said, help me figure out how to explain the diagnosis in terms that the average person will understand. So I used an example. So Levi has what's called diabetes insipidus. And according to the result I got here in the example, it says, is a condition where your body can't properly balance the amount of water in it. Unlike the more common diabetes mellitus, which involves blood sugar levels, diabetes insipidus is all about water regulation. Okay, so that's two sentences that very simply tells this person two very important things. One, this is not diabetes. Because everybody thinks that. They hear diabetes and their brain just shuts off. They're like, oh, he has diabetes. No, he does not have diabetes mellitus. He has diabetes insipidus. And actually, they have since changed the name because there was so many people getting mixed up on this. That's beside the point. So you can take your child's rare diagnosis that even doctors don't understand, and you can do the same thing to help other providers or to help people understand it at a simple level so that you can open conversations to have it understood at a deeper level. So I can just totally picture this being super effective at IEP meetings as you are helping people get to know your child. All right. Other examples, and I used it this summer as I said, give me a list of 20 healthy snacks for the summer. I don't think I had the summer part, but I was like, okay, this whole snack thing at the family, at the summer is driving me crazy. I need to have a list to help me brainstorm stuff besides junk food, basically is the bottom line there. So I have a list of 20 things. And we still eat junk food, but we do have a list. And actually it has improved. It has greatly improved my ability to feel like I can kind of plan good things. Okay. Another idea is when you are perhaps preparing for a new specialist appointment or a new diagnosis, or even to a new doctor for the same diagnosis, right? So I can think of any variety of questions that you would ask chat to help you brainstorm on things you want to cover at this appointment so that you get what you need. And that's where, you may not have the experience of that diagnosis yet, but chat does and can help you apply that experience to your need and your unique perspective to help you come up with the things that you value and is important for you to ask. This isn't as much as an example, as much as another concept. Anytime you find yourself getting stuck, in a place where you're I don't know, or just kind of feel I don't know what to do here, you can go and seek the help of chat. So an example for this is that I came up with, how can I find good childcare for my medically complex child? Now, if it gives you a list of 300 things, that would be great, right? But it probably won't. You might be familiar with 90% of them, but there might be those one or two that you're oh, I didn't think of that angle. Or there's that aspect of that I can apply to make what I already know even better. So that's what I mean about using it that cheat code to do something faster and better. Another example, or ways to use it, I guess is what I'm looking at here, is writing a heartfelt email to a teacher or caregiver. So if you're like me, oftentimes you think, oh my gosh, that person was incredible. They really helped me. I want to communicate it to them. But then do I find the time to sit down and write a well-drafted letter, or even just a letter period? The answer is no, not as much as I wish. And so you could write into chat, write me a 3-sentence thank you note to a person who went out of their way to understand the unique needs of my child in math class. And so I'm modeling, giving it specific information because that's what you'll get back. And so I sampled this one because I was curious to what happened. And this, I feel could have used more color. I could have given it better data to be able to make it more specific. But I also could have just taken what it had there and copied and pasted it into an email or a text and express my thanks in a meaningful way, right? In a way that kind of goes beyond saying, thank you. That was nice. Okay, last kind of brainstorm way you can use it that's more specific is support groups. So I think we all have mixed relationships with support groups because sometimes they don't feel very supportive. And so this is where I think you can lean into finding something that does work. So the prompt that I came up with was make me a list of 5 local support groups and 5 virtual support groups for moms who have kids with epilepsy. So obviously you fill in the blank with whatever is appropriate for you. And you might find 4 local things that you had no idea existed. How cool would that be? Or even virtual. And I actually was very tempted. I was like, oh, I wonder if the Special Needs Mom podcast will come up and then it'll feed my ego. And then I decided, oh, I don't think I'm going to do it. It probably won't come up. Plus, who needs to feed their ego? So, okay. Ego aside. Tips that I've illustrated them, but I want to kind of call them out and describe them a little bit. And these things I think will help you. And really the concept here is start and then iterate. So start with just like, boom. As an example, what are the best ways for a caregiver to use ChatGPT? I wrote that in there too, and it was fun to hear the answer back. Okay, so that's a start, right? And then you might get some information back. I'm like, okay, this is good, but what they're missing is my customizations of like what kind of caregiver I am. So what I did is I iterated this request to be more specific. So again, start, then iterate. So more detail is what usually is better. So the iteration, the second version of this is what are the best ways for a caregiver of a child who uses a wheelchair to use ChatGPT? So adding that detail, whatever the detail might be, can get you more specific and more useful information. The other thing to mention is what you get back might be too much. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read all that. That seems like a lot. So you can refine it. You can ask it to give you what you need. This is such a good life example. Like literally, I'm preaching all the time to help people get what they need. So an example is like, okay, you ask it a question, it gives you like 3 pages and you're like, oh, it's too much. So you can tell it, now tell me that in fewer words, or you can be more specific. Now tell me that in 1 paragraph or whatever the thing is that feels appropriate. And so you can see how, like I said, it's that genie that like you get your wish, you get to have what you want when you're using this tool. So I want you to have fun with it. That's my last tip, my last trick, my last thing that I want you to kind of go away with is just to have fun with this. A lot of you I know have jobs and work. And so you can apply all of this to all of that. And you might even already have ways you're using it that you're like, oh my gosh, I just didn't think about using this in my role as a mom or a caregiver. So have fun with it. I constantly am just actually amazed, like, wow, like it is so intense on what it takes on the administrative side to be Levi's parent. And so I know you guys will feel me on that. And I'd love to hear if you try it, what's working for you. If you already use it, give me your tips and I'll share them here on the podcast because, like I said earlier, like we got to help each other out. This is a sisterhood where we have each other's back. So share that. This would be a great opportunity to use the text the show function. So you may not know that if you go to the show notes, there's a new little link that says text the show and you can text me about anything. And it actually comes like to me. This is not the kind of show where it goes off to like some, customer service something or another in another state or country. This is a tight team that runs the show. So I would love to hear from you. It does mean the world to me. And the one last thing I will ask you before we wrap up this episode is to rate or review the show. If you've listened to other podcasts, you probably hear us ask this all the time. I know it's like your mind's already turned off. You're like, I don't want to. I'm busy. My hands are wet with dish soap, or, I'm holding my child and whatever. There's a million things you could be doing. But I do ask that you pause just for a second to rate and review the show. It means a ton because what it does for podcasts is it tells the players that other people might want to hear the show because you like this show. And so that would be really, really helpful so that we can share the good work of this show and the podcast and the community with other people. So please do that. And while you're there, thumbs on your phone, you can go ahead and sign up for the email newsletter that I mentioned earlier in the show so that you can stay up to date with the latest. Now, thank you for hanging out with me, for being who you are, that inspire me all the time, for how y'all show up and the beauty of a woman who asks for more, who says, okay, I don't want to just be a special needs mom who suffers through. I want to be a special needs mom who's connected, who's known, who has community and has hope. So you guys inspire me. I cannot wait to continue serving here on the podcast and beyond. We'll see you on the next episode.